All right, here we go. Hello, everybody. My name is Alex Barrios. I'm from the IGA Foundation of America. And each Friday, I'll be interviewing a fellow kidney recipient or living donor to share their journey in their process. And today, I'm here with Mike Atkinson, kidney recipient from California. He has a unique story on how he received a second chance at life. Hey, Mike, thanks for taking a few minutes to share your story.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. This is fun.
Appreciate it. So, if you don't mind, can you tell me your story and how you kind of came to be with your kidney disease?
Well, we found it in 2013. On my annual, physical, my doctor showed me a chart of my blood pressure had consistently been going up over about 5 years. And so we spent 6 months playing with new meds and all that stuff and seeing what worked. And we finally got it dialed in. And in December, he said, okay, let's do a full set of labs, just see how everything's looking. And in that, found that my creatinine number was way high, and referred me to a nephrologist, which I didn't even know what it was when he said it.
Yeah.
And so I went in early, well, actually, I think it was like January 2nd of 2014, met with the nephrologist. It was interesting. He said from just the little data he had a sense it might be IgA. And so that was on a Friday. On Monday, I did a biopsy, and he confirmed that it was. He rated it as a moderate. And so I did a 6-month prednisone treatment to try and turn it backwards. And all it did was level it off. It didn't go back.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, as soon as I stopped the prednisone, it took off like crazy. And in less than a year, my kidneys had failed. So it was only a couple months after stopping the treatment, he used the T word for the first time and said transplant. And I went, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty earth shattering. And so right then and there, they said, hey, get out the word, let people know. And so I started putting out a few, feelers and stuff, but it wasn't until I'd gone through all the testing and everything that, and I had gotten a lot of information from the transplant center, that I put it out in earnest. I ended up getting like 21 people that offered to donate.
Okay.
And through that whole process, and as you know, there's a lot about that process. There's a long list that disqualifies people and that type of thing. So they're very thorough about it.
Mm-hmm.
And through that process, only about 4 or 5 made it through. Mm-hmm. And then like in the next to last process, most of them were taken out.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like some in the process found out that their kidneys weren't doing well, and their doctors are like, no, you need these kidneys.
Yes.
So, that type of thing. So, anyway, one of the people that made it through, and she was like one of the first people to raise her hand. She was amazing. A young gal named Emery, and Emery was down here in college. She had no family around here. Her boyfriend had gone on deployment. He was a Marine. My son happened to be on the same Marine deployment. And we had connected. I had a daughter around her age and a lot of kids, and she kind of hung out with us, and we became a second family for her college years. And she was a dear part of the family for that time. And she had offered. She was one of the first ones, and she'd made it through. The very last step is she came down. She lived in Northern California. I'm in San Diego. Mm-hmm. And she was tested by the transplant center. And they called me and said, good news, bad news. Good news is Emory is like what we call a golden donor. Like almost anybody can take her kidney. And I said, that's great. She goes, but you can't take her kidney. And it was because she was so small and I was so large, her kidney would just, not do well in my system.
Sure.
And so they said, we're going to put you in a paired donor exchange program.
I was just about to ask that question. How that conversation started, right? So,
that was it. And I had actually learned about it. Here's something interesting, Alex. It was really funny because obviously I went through a intensive period of education about this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And in that process found out just the incredible need for kidneys.
It's huge.
And there was a time after going through that and, talking to other people on social media and learning about their stories that I actually felt like, if I just do this 1-to-1, she gives her kidney to me, it feels like a waste. Where if we went into the the donor exchange program, then 2 people would get a kidney out of it.
Exactly.
And so that just kind of stuck in the back of my head. And so when this came up, while it certainly complicated the process, I felt like, well, that's great because this means we're sharing the love a little bit more. And they said, the good news is we think we might have a donor for you that's in the system. And so that process started, and sure enough, this guy was.
There we go. That's pretty awesome. So tell me a little. So where did you fall in the midst of that paired exchange? I kind of read a little bit, and we can talk more about that later with you and stuff like that. Where did you fall in that chain? Do you know?
Yeah. So I'll try and tell this real quick. It's kind of a crazy story. It starts with a gal named Amy who has cystic fibrosis. She wasn't supposed to make it till 10, and she's in her 20s. She got a lung transplant, but still passed away.
Sure.
Her cousin, Breland, Bree went to her doctor and said, I really want to do something to help somebody in Amy's memory. And he said, well, that's easy. It's kidney donation. It's the biggest need that we have. And really it's a real easy recovery for donors, especially someone young like her. And so she said, let's do it. So she got put into the system. And then so now introduce Heather. Heather is a firefighter in California, and she was on a forest fire and had gotten massively dehydrated, and her kidneys failed. She went through a kidney transplant, and it failed, and she was on dialysis and not doing well. Then bring in Glenn. Glenn is on an adventure trip with a bunch of friends, and he hears some of them talking about, oh, Heather, we feel so bad for her, that she's not doing well and everything, and she really needs a kidney. And so Glenn asked a few more questions. And when he got back, he found her on Facebook and sent her a message and said, you don't know me, but people I love you.
That's wonderful.
And I'd like to give you a kidney.
Oh, that's amazing.
And that all came about because he had looked a few years earlier to do it.
Sure.
But then it was a lot harder process, and he was working and couldn't take the time away from work, but saw how much easier it was now.
Sure.
And offered.
Yeah.
And so, so they started that process, but it was funny. It was the opposite. He was too big for her. She's a short gal, and so they put them into the paired donor exchange program, and they matched Heather up with Breland. And so Heather got her her transplant from Breland's kidney September of 2015. So right about that time is when I'm told we have to go into the paired donor exchange program. So it was right at the front of my transplant coordinator's head, and went, oh, Glenn might work out. They're similar age. Glenn's in really good shape. And so sure enough, we were a match. And so at that point, it was just working out the timing. And so we scheduled for December 29th, 2015.
Okay.
So here's the crazy part. In that that day on the 29th, we go in and we check in, and we get brought into pre-op real quick. And I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting there with my wife and my pastor, and the nurse in charge of the pre-op came in, and she said, hey, do you want to meet your donor? And I said, oh, yeah, I'd already approved that and said that, that would be good. So I'm sure we'll connect at some point. She goes, no, he's right here and he wants to meet you. Wow. So she basically broke all kinds of laws to connect us. And we are eternally grateful for her doing that.
That's beautiful.
And so he came in and had Heather with him, because Heather was going to be his, person to take care of him, his caretaker for this. She's now 6 months or so past her kidney, or 4 months past her kidney transplant. And so she's going to take care of Glenn. And so they came up, we had about maybe 5 minutes to say hi, get to know each other's names. And then he had to go off to get his kidney taken out.
Sure.
And so anyway, in recovery, we were only there 2 days after the transplant. Late the first day, Heather came to visit me, and we sat and talked for a long time. Right there and then we connected on Facebook. And after she left, I went to her Facebook, and I found Glenn had posted a picture of her and him after the transplant had happened,
Mm-hmm.
and after his kidney had been taken out, and just said how he was doing and such. So I went to his page, send a friend request, and so the next day, a few hours before I was going to check out, he came up, and Heather, and I don't know, we probably spent 2 hours talking, and found out. It's funny because when my transplant coordinator called, she goes, "This guy is like separated at birth. You guys are so similar. It's eerie."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so sure enough, we hit it off right off the bat. We just had a lot in common, and enjoyed each other's humor, and it was fantastic. So, that's all done, and he went back home to Northern California, and I came home, to my home in San Diego.
Sure. That's wonderful, Mike. Oh, that's great. I'm so glad to hear those kind of stories are one in a million, right? A dime a dozen.
Yeah.
And here,
Yeah.
we have all these chains of people, and the relationship you guys have all been able to build is just simply phenomenal.
Yeah. Let me tell you too, let me finish the chain.
Sure. Yeah.
So my donor, Emery,
Mm-hmm.
was able to donate her kidney to Laura in Colorado. Now, Laura was one of those people that had a hard time finding a kidney. She was she needed a particular type, and Emery, being a golden, donor,
Right.
they were able to connect them. And her husband was going to donate on her behalf. He donated, I believe, to somebody in Detroit. That person's donor donated to somebody in Atlanta. And so we have heard that it probably included like 7 or so recipients in the whole chain. And it was pretty crazy. We've tried to find those people, and it hasn't worked out. But
Sure.
But anyway, we're just happy to. It all started with Breland and her altruistic, donation. It was she's an amazing young lady.
That is wonderful. Yeah, altruistic donation is phenomenal, and the work I do at my transplant center here in Kentucky has been phenomenal. So yeah, I can speak to seeing and having those angels out there are wonderful.
Yeah, they are. They are angels.
Definitely. So I thank you for sharing that, Mike. I really do appreciate it. So we'll wrap this up. It's pretty quick. So, as this is Donate Life Month, and is there anything else you want to add or kind of inform our audience who's kind of viewing this, to talk about living donation and what you feel you can, to kind of promote and bring living donation to the forefront of our, of our society and to our nation? Because I think there's things that aren't, a lot of folks don't understand it. So as somebody who received a kidney, what do you feel, in the chain that you feel, you can leave us off with?
Well, the one thing that I still see all the time, and I don't know, it concerns me or frustrates me, is people saying, well, so-and-so wanted to donate, but she wasn't a match, and it's like, either they just don't know about the donor exchange program, or they weren't told about it, which really concerns me, that if medical, professionals are not telling people about this.
Right.
And so, with this donor exchange program, nobody shouldn't get a kidney. Exactly. Horrible double negative there.
I know
but
what you mean. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's open to pretty much everybody now.
It is. It's pretty cool.
And unfortunately, I don't feel like that's become widespread knowledge, that people have this old concept of, well, I got to find a blood match, and Alex, as you know, blood matches aren't even that important anymore. Right. Exactly. They can cross type them and, do all this stuff.
There's a lot of things you can do. Sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. It just feels like people don't do it because they feel there's so many hurdles, and those hurdles aren't there anymore.
And
so
bust those myths as well, to tell them about it. And I think it starts with, you know, in my opinion, I think it starts with educating from, you know, right once you're kind of going through that evaluation process, to know from the get-go that you don't, it doesn't need to be always a direct match, and that you
Yeah.
can look at the paired exchange program, or you can look
Yeah.
at other programs like
Yeah.
you know, the kidney registry, things like that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot
Yeah.
out there. There's a lot out
Yeah.
there. So I feel like
Yeah.
if we can educate them one by one and have that conversation at our transplant centers in our
Right.
around the nation, that's what I love to
Right.
do.
Yeah. And you know, just keeping in mind that the donation surgery is very non-invasive,
Yep.
and it is very. I mean, Glenn, you know, was I don't know, 56 or so at the time, and he was in good shape. But I mean, he was back at work in just, you know, 2 or 3 weeks.
Yep.
And I mean, it's just not that much of a deal anymore.
Mhm.
So they really, again, all those barriers are taken away. You do have to meet all the initial
Sure.
criteria, you
Sure.
know,
Sure.
but once you get past that, man, it's you know,
Happens.
easy for me to say, but it's worth it,
Yeah.
right?
As a
You know,
recipient, as a recipient myself, yeah, I can speak to it as well. My donor, you know, a living donor as well, 13 years ago for myself, and she is doing well now. And when she donated 13 years ago, she was healthy, and she's in her early 60s now, I think, and
yeah,
she's doing well. I mean, I'm 40.
yeah, wow,
It's been wonderful.
that's
So yeah, I can speak to it
that's
as well
awesome.
as a recipient like yourself, that it's
Yeah,
been living donation is something that I think needs to be, you know, brought to the forefront, and kind of bust those myths, and kind of
yeah,
jump and realize those hurdles aren't there anymore. Like you
yeah,
said, it's very
yeah.
true.
Hey, just as a PS,
Yeah,
just to let people know, Glenn, who ended up being my direct donor,
sure.
ended up moving to San Diego a few
Yeah.
years ago.
Uh,
And so he and his wonderful lady, Alexandra, have become dear, close friends of ours. And we're able to get together on a periodic basis. We just talked on the phone last night just to
oh,
catch up.
good.
And so yeah, that's even the cherry on top, so to speak.
Of course, of course, of course. Well, Mike, I appreciate you giving me a few minutes today to share, you know, your story and your unique story with your chain. Um, I look forward to continue having this dialogue with you and with others. And if you have any questions or concerns, you know, feel free to reach out to either me or anybody from the International, you know, IGA Foundation, and we'll be in touch.
The foundation is awesome.
It
I'm
is
a
great.
big
They are a wonderful
supporter.
group.
Yeah,
They're a wonderful group.
wonderful.
So
Great. Thank you, Alex.
take care. I'm gonna stop now. All right, take care.